So we have got 3 more episodes of Vox Machina left for this animated season, and I'm going to talk about more so the themes of this last batch of episodes than what really happened in the episodes themselves, because I think the themes will come back later more so than like the actual things that happened, which they will come back as well. So what happened this week is that we lost Mr. Percival de Rouleau, which does happen in the main campaign as well, but I think we might actually have him stay dead for a bit longer. Hopefully not for the next year. I hope we resolve this within the next 3 episodes, because I personally don't want to miss him for the next year. But I understand if they do go that way. I know Taliesin himself had wanted that resurrection to be really hard to complete. I'll talk about that. That grief won't settle as hard, especially in a D&D campaign or a fantasy thing, if you can just like bring them back, you know. The entire handful of episodes is trying to find Ripley and then also like defeating Thordak. So they find Ripley, and Percy, after confessing his feelings for Vex and not hearing anything back from her, is then kidnapped essentially because Vex sets off the trap, which is a parallel to what happened when she died and he had set up the trap that accidentally killed her. So it's a fun little parallel there, unfortunately. Fun's not the right word. Fun, it's a heartbreaking parallel that they keep doing this to each other. And then you have, you know, Vex's warning of like, make sure there's not traps. So Percy ends up talking to Ripley and essentially forgiving her in the end, because he has the whole thing where he's like, I have to prove that I'm not like a creature of revenge anymore and that I want to be a better person for you. And he does end up going and forgiving her, and then he ends up dying at her hand. And there's something really interesting in that whole like death scene where like the gun he drops to the ground as a sign of forgiveness then starts glowing when he dies. But I personally believe that he probably has his soul taken by Thordak and is in some like punishment from that demon, especially because when Pike tries to revive him, she says he's gone instead of he's dead, which is interesting to me. It's an interesting wording. It sounds like she maybe can't feel his soul at all, and not that his soul is passing on. We also have the parallel of later in the 3 episodes, Cash's death. And you see that the Raven Queen comes to collect him, which is, I'm so sad we're not going to get like Cash more fully if he doesn't come back. Cash is supposed to end up being a father. The idea later, like by the players, that they're going to have twins and then name them Vex and Vax. So like, So we end up getting Percy's death, and we get the motivations for a lot of characters, because a lot of Vox Machina has lost essentially their baby brother, because Percy is the youngest of the group. Percy does talk to Grog in the campaign about how like Grog is his big brother, and Percy's like really excited to have a big brother again. Scanlan wasn't even there for it, even though like Scanlan's only other death that we like really know is that like his mother had died in front of him. So I'm interested to see the way that Scanlan could, if he wasn't comatose right now, mourn Percy, since he wasn't there at all, and he hadn't been there twice, the 2 times Percy had been in trouble recently.
Where's Percy?
And then I wanted to talk about Vex'ahlia, because obviously Vex is in love with him, even though she won't say it. And there's a lot that goes into her feelings, and some of it is from the campaign and some of it is from the book. If you don't know the novelization of Kith and Kin, it is the novel that is the story before Vex and Vax joined Vox Machina. And it does actually cover the grief of their mother and the moment that they find the news that she has died. And I want to talk about that in the way that she is mourning Percy, because I think they're very similar in some ways. There's one thing that in Kith and Kin, there's a moment where Vex is very overwhelmed by the city around her. Her first reaction is to sneak out at night and run away from the inn that they're in, because she just needs to not be so like overwhelmed by everything. So she does go on a walk, and it gets her into trouble, and it's a whole thing, but she does try to run from the things that overwhelm her. And this comes up a lot. The thing with grief is that it doesn't look the same for everybody. These few episodes show that. Vex'ahlia spends a lot of her time feeling immense guilt, especially for the things left unsaid. She again set off the trap that essentially led to his death. This isn't her first experience with fast and sudden loss, because a lot of the ways that she found Percy is a lot of the ways that she kind of found out that her mother had passed. They had left Byrodin to live with their father, and once they left and came back to Byrodin, they had found out that Thordak had attacked their home, and that a lot of people had lost people, but they had lost their mother without even knowing, because nobody had told them that that had happened. So that very like quick realization that the person that you loved so dearly was suddenly gone, very much she is reliving that same like, I just found out my mom died and I wasn't even there to do anything for it. Especially in the way, and Vex'ahlia does say this in the book, she says, I always thought that we would be able to go home. And it was expected that because their mother was human and they are half-elves, that they would eventually outlive their mother, but it was never a thing that they thought that like, I would always be able to go home. I would always be able to see that my mother was sewing dresses and, you know, that candles were burning late at night because she had a deadline to meet and sewing stuff. And I just never thought that that was something that I couldn't have. And that is something that Vex ends up kind of internalizing, because that's why she's like, I can't get close to anybody, because what happens when that doesn't exist anymore? What happens when I can't go home? Her reaction to grief, and I'm enjoying very much that they're not showing it necessarily like healthy coping mechanisms of grief, because your grief process is always individualized and it's not always something that is the healthiest, but it is the way that you are processing it. And Vex'ahlia in the book is very much like guilt and denial, and that is very much what she focuses on, and that is very much what she is focusing on with Percy. Vax, in the moments after, in the night after they had found out that their mother had died, he actually spends the entire night comforting Vex as she cried, and that is probably why he knew where she was mourning Percy, because one, they're twins and they know everything about each other, but because it happened before and they had spent that next day at their mother's grave, he knew exactly where to find her and what she was doing, especially because the twins don't have that many people to lose. It is one of those, like, it changes them fundamentally. The promise that Vex makes after staying at their mother's grave to Vex is that they will keep walking. They will keep walking away from Byrodin, and to herself she promises that she will keep walking away from the grief and the loss and the ability to accept it, essentially. And that is very much what she does with Percy when she says, I need to leave Vox Machina, I need to leave Whitestone, I need to leave Percy's grave, I need to get as far away as possible, like, I'm not useful to you. So seeing that she is still handling grief the same way was really exciting, because I know some people were thinking that she was out of character. The thing with grief is that if you are in character with grief, that is not an interesting way to write grief, because a lot of things that people deal with grief are not the normal ways they'll act, and it's not always predictable or precedented. Vex reacts to her mother's death as well, because their childhood friend Duncan comes and talks to him, and it ends up being a conversation between Vax and Duncan, and Vex very rarely speaking. She's very quiet, she's very withdrawn, and that is also what happens when they, have the funeral and they are talking and praying to the Dawn Father, which is really cool, because Vex will one day become like a patron of the Dawn Father. That is like the deity that she'll work under, which is cool that she didn't say anything during his funeral. I liked that little detail, because they are so intertwined later on. The memory where Elena says that love is stronger than anything is actually like really super important foreshadowing.
Remember, there is nothing stronger than love.
Because in the actual campaign, when they're playing at the table, Taliesin, who plays Percy, wanted his resurrection to be really hard and really difficult. He didn't want it just to be like, oh, we miss Percy, can we have him back, please? He wanted it to be really hard to bring him back, because Percy was fairly content. He confessed to Vex, and he had forgiven Ripley, and not on the path of revenge anymore. He was very content with being dead. So to be brought back had to be something like really, really strong. And the thing that does bring him back is Vex saying that her heart had always belonged to him, that she loved him, and that she loved Whitestone.
Because of what you think, it wasn't because of my father or the title. It was because of Whitestone. It was because of you. You allowed me to be a part of the thing that you hold dearest. And I was so proud. But I don't want to be here if you're not. Whitestone still needs you, darling. I still need you here. I should have told you. It's yours.
And that is what eventually draws him back, because that love is stronger than anything than saying like, oh, we just miss you, Percy. Can you come back, please? And that is really cool that they foreshadowed that with their mother. So I enjoyed that. And then, of course, it foreshadows Vex and Vax doing the killing blow against Thordak and actually like saving everybody. That one shot of Vax before he kills Thordak is just it's cinema. So their defeat of Thordak obviously does not mend the relationship with their father. It doesn't bring Percy or Elena back, but it is the very first step in the twins actually like understanding the losses they had and like making amends on it and trying to learn from it and not run away from it for once. And I think that will be a very important moment in their healing journey, because grief is something they've carried for so long that it's not going to go away, because grief doesn't just go away overnight, but it is something that they will actively choose to try to work through, I think, from here on out. There is a lot of talk of grief right now. I know that Andrew Garfield has done some like press circuit stuff that's like kind of been going around Twitter, but something he said was that it hurts to love fully, it hurts to attach because the inevitable loss that comes with it. But it is the only way. It is the only way to live life of vitality and fullness and meaning, and it breaks the kind of calcified, protected, hardened versions of our heart open so we can reconnect to ourselves. So anyway, I think that grief is a really cool portal into our hearts so that we can feel the love as well. And I don't know if there's anything I found that like perfectly encapsulates the theme of these few episodes than that quote. Because grief is going to be really heavy and grief is going to continue to haunt them, especially since we don't know what's going to happen to Scanlan. I have theories, I have things that I think will happen because of the campaign, but they've changed so much. Like Cash wasn't actually supposed to die. He kind of is just the like example of what happens when somebody dies. So you can see that Percy maybe didn't do that because we didn't see Percy get collected by the Raven Queen, but also Vax wasn't there to see that. So we don't know. This is a little bit of a heavy YouTube video, but these episodes were very heavy, and it is something that is so important, especially to the story going forward. And I'm very excited to see where it goes from here because we only have 3 episodes left, and that's a lot of ground to cover. So we'll see if we get Percy back. It would be really cool to not have to wait a year. Do you think that maybe he has been taken by Orthac? Do you think that Vex will be able to handle the grief that they've been feeling in a healthy way? Considering that, you know, Vex finally talked to Keyleth and they're kind of like a thing now, which is something that he was afraid of before that. It's like they're I know Vex and Percy and Vax and Keyleth have been foiling each other this whole time, so it's really cool to see like the opposite of what each twin is going through. Do you think that Scanlan is okay? Do you think that Pike will be able to find joy outside of the Everlight since she did find out that it was her with the power and not the Everlight? I want to know your thoughts on these episodes, so leave them down below, and I will see you guys next week. Bye!